It's D-U-E-U tell. I see you by this point, you're reading my mind. It's time for football. We about to keep this thing moving. I'm about it, you're with it, let's do it. We gon' make this thing official, you heard me? If you're the best, then let's prove it. The goal is set to have a team become a unit, man. We about to keep this thing moving. I'm about it, you're with it, let's do it. We gon' make this thing official, you heard me? If you're the best, then let's prove it. The goal is set to have a team become a unit, yeah. D-U-E-U.
Welcome to Football Gameplan's NFL All-32 show. I am Emery Hunt, the czar of the playbook. Be sure to follow me on all of my social media accounts. Twitter at Football Gameplan. YouTube is Football Gameplan. Instagram is all one word, Football Gameplan. And we're rocking out here on the Game Plus Network on our 200th episode. Thank you guys for all the support, for everything that you've done for Football Gameplan and letting this show continue to grow, blossom, and do great things. And what a great way to talk about our 200th episode, or spin our 200th episode, then take a look back at last week when we were at the NFL Scouting Combine. Now, you know, this was the first combine that took place in person since February 2022, when we were all out there before everything shut down and went complete kaput for about 2 years. So it was great to be back out there, but it all wasn't, fun and games like it was prior. This was a little bit of a unique change in what we saw from the NFL in terms of how the scouting combine was running. Maybe it's a spin forward to how things will look in the future. And to help us break it all down, we're joined now with Turron Davenport of ESPN, who was at the NFL Scouting Combine along with myself and others. Turron, appreciate you taking time.
Hey, man, anytime. When I could grab onto a rising star, I'm going to just try to rise with you, man.
Hey, man, I appreciate that, man. I'm low clouds, man. I'm low clouds hanging over the city. And we hung over the city of Indianapolis all week long, watching these prospects, going through the whole process and things of that nature. This was our first combine back since January or February 2020, before everything shut down. Firstly, what was your take on this year's edition of the combine, and who was a player that stood out to you the most this week?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there were changes in how they worked the combine, and some of the changes were COVID related, others were just money related, and there were some things that we talked about that just didn't seem to make sense. Having the guys lift the same day they have to run, and for the receivers catch passes, quarterbacks throw, it just didn't really make sense there, and that's why a lot of guys didn't run. But as far as standouts, I mean, there's so many. I think just from like a physical standout for me, and I talked about him all week to you, was Christian Watson out of North Dakota State. And I got to go over and watch him with Bomarritos, and he was working on the starts. And I remember telling you, that dude, he's going to run fast. Like he's getting out. And sure enough, he ran. I think it was 4.29 unofficial. I don't remember what the official time was, but it was fast, especially for someone his size. So he was somebody that stood out. Sky Moore is another one. Just on film, he stands out because you see him literally undressing, like taking all their clothes off at the line of scrimmage when they come up to jam him. And that's something that he just kind of transferred over. I got to talk to him about that. It was pretty cool just hearing him explain like his plan and how he goes through, making sure that he's able to get those free releases. And then he went out and he performed well. Those are two guys. Daniel Faalele, I joked with you about how, I got off the elevator and this big giant is standing there smiling at me, and it was him. Just getting to talk to him a little bit, find out, what it is that he loves about football. And he said he loves being able to overpower another man and take advantage of him and not get in trouble for it. So that seems to be kind of like the prevailing statement that these big dogs like to say, they love most about the game. I'm trying to think of another guy, Drake Jackson. I really like talking to him. He performed well. He ran pretty well in the 4.5 range. But I like talking to him about the pass rush and some of the guys he watched. And one thing that came out to me, all of these guys watch, obviously TJ Watt, but all of these guys watch Max Crosby. And it was pretty cool because Crosby is a guy I was very high on, when he was coming into the draft. And a lot of people said he shouldn't have come out, but he did. And look, he's one of the best players. So, yeah, I liked just hearing the pass rush plan that Drake Jackson has, and just the fact that he understood that, he was a name coming into this year that was one of the top options as pass rusher. It kind of fell off a little bit, but he wants to show that he could do everything. And he's a guy, you saw him line up even over top of slot receivers at USC. So he has done it all.
Be sure to follow this man on social media at @TDavenport_NFL. He's Turron Davenport with ESPN, covers the Titans, has a great radio show out there as well in Nashville. Turron, it's going to be a fun time breaking this thing down as we steamroll toward the 2022 NFL Draft. And we're now joined here with Chris James of Chopping It Up with CJ. He has a great podcast. Go and subscribe and check that out wherever you get your podcast from. And we're just going to take a big picture look at this, Chris. We just got off the combine, and now it's free agency is in full swing. And we have that along with pro day season is underway. And then you have the draft. If you're in charge of a football team, an NFL team, how do you parse through the combine, free agency, pro days, and the draft? How do you kind of organize it and sort things out?
Sure. So we'll start with the combine since we were both just there. The combine for me is kind of it's your brush up, meaning you should already be going into it with an opinion on players. You've already done some film study. You've reached out to teams. You've done different things. Now it's the cleanup. Do they test either as well as you thought their film looked like, or was there something that stood out in a negative fashion that they need to improve that the test also confirmed? And then you get to kind of bounce ideas off of other people. Obviously, you're not sharing, confidential information about the team, but when you're having talks with people, you've had a couple of, let's call them shrimp cocktails, you might just say a few things and you learn a couple of things from there. So that's what the combine really is to me. It's more of the brush up. Then you go into free agency. See, unlike the draft and these college players, these are known commodities. These are guys you've seen play in the league. These are guys you played against. So now you're able to fill your roster with players that, fit your system, that fit your culture, that fit like that are veteran presence, that you can actually make sure, okay, as I'm going into the draft, now these things are taken care of. And then pro days are more the intimate session. This is where you really get to drill down, whether it's just focusing on a handful of players from a certain school. You really get to talk to their, the coaches, not just the head coach, but position coaches. You get more intel about how that guy functions to bring him into your organization. So that's what pro days are for me. It's their comfort level. It's their thing. They're in their environment. They get to show off their talent. But really, for you, you get to learn as much about that guy as possible, even more than you get a chance at the combine. And then the draft, if I were a GM or a head scout, my approach to the draft is super simple, but it sounds complicated. You always take the best player available. That's just what you do. If you build too much talent on your team, guess what? Your team's just too talented. And it doesn't matter if the guy isn't a perfect fit, if you just know he's a can't miss type guy and he fell for no reason, because guess what? That's commodity moving forward. Maybe another team he fits well with, and they're willing to give you 2 first-rounders like Jamal Adams for Seattle. They saw a fit. The Jets were able to get a commodity out of him because they took the best player available.
And it's simple when you think about it that way, and that's how really it kind of steamrolls toward the toward the NFL draft, and that's why we see it how we see it. And on the back end, you have your training camps, you sort everything out, your preseason, and then we kick off with the regular season. But I mean, it's fascinating to watch this whole process, and it really gets started with the All-Star games. Then you roll into the combine, and that's when it starts to rev up as we steamroll toward that 2022 NFL draft. So be sure to follow him on Twitter at CJ49. Subscribe to his podcast, Chopping It Up with CJ. He does a great job with that wherever you get your podcast. And we'll step aside and be back with more Football Game Plan's NFL All-32 show here on the Game Plus Network. And welcome back to Football Game Plan's NFL All-32 show here on the Game Plus Network. Emery Hunt, the czar of the playbook. We are now joined with Geneclements at Geneclements on Twitter, Coach Geneclements on YouTube. There's a lot of great work with this Talking Spicy podcast that he has on all his social media platforms. Be sure to follow him. We're going to talk, Gene, right now. I mean, the league season kicked off with a bang. We got quarterbacks going every which way. Russell Wilson going to the Broncos, the Colts sending Carson Wentz off to Washington. And so now you have a whole unique scenario on what's going on. Aaron Rodgers being re-signed by the Packers. I heard your talk, Spicy, this morning about how you said to Green Bay. Be thankful for your selfish quarterback and $50 million that they gave him. So what's your initial take on the pro quarterbacks that's on the move, and where does that kind of put a lot of teams going into the draft? And what people are talking about is not the top tier type of quarterbacks at the top.
Yeah, I think what we need to recognize is there is clearly a double standard, and you've heard me talk about it before. But like the way in which we view these quarterbacks, starting with the least of the three in Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz now gets another team to give over multiple draft picks in order to bring him in as what they believe to be the last piece to a winning culture there. Have we seen anything that tells us that Carson Wentz is better than Taylor Heineke? At this point, what they're getting from Taylor Heineke is exactly what they're going to get from Carson Wentz. Plus level athleticism, but crash test dummy type of plays. Some good plays, some plays that make you go, man, this guy can really be the guy, mixed with a whole bunch of plays that goes, oh, now I see why he's not where he was last year. And so this thought process that Carson Wentz keeps getting all of these opportunities now, not to compete for jobs, but to just be given jobs. Meanwhile, you have other quarterbacks out there who we've heard that can only be backups or they're done. There's clearly a double standard here. Good luck to Washington. Good luck to the Washington football team, the Commanders. They'll be back in the top 10 next year unless something crazy happens with this season. If you look at what the Seahawks did, they made probably the most sensible move for the situation they were in. They had a quarterback who had looked around and said, this is no longer the winning culture that I walked into. This is no longer the team that I feel like I can continue to build my star off of. I'm looking for the exit. They got a king's ransom from the Broncos for him, and now the Broncos get the quarterback that they're looking for to run their team. And God bless them, because I don't know what they're going to put else, what else they're going to put around him to help him. I still think I think that they're more than one player away, a quarterback away, and so that'll be interesting to see how they move. Now they still do have, I believe, 4 or 5 picks in the top 115, 120 picks, but none of them are what we would deem to be premium picks. And now they're going to really have to hit on some of those guys if they want to have a chance to run the table and get to the championship like the Rams did last year. But remember, even after the Rams added Matthew Stafford, in season, they added all-pro Odell Beckham, and they added all everything Von Miller, because they felt like they needed just that much more. If the Broncos are really willing to go all in, let's see what else they're willing to spend that money on. And then with the Packers and Aaron Rodgers, this is a cluster of all clusters. You had the game set in place. They had the opportunity to do exactly what Seattle did and probably got more because it's Aaron Rodgers. They could have done that, handed the reins over to Love, drafted another quarterback just in case Love wasn't the guy, and kept this train moving. Yes, you're probably going to lose Davante Adams, who doesn't necessarily want to play with some other guy. Guess what you can get for Davante Adams? Another king's ransom. So the Packers had an opportunity through good business, which is what they did when they got rid of, or they told Brett Favre they weren't going to let him come back. They ended up trading him away, and they were able to get Aaron Rodgers into the fold as the starter. So they had that succession in place to continue to do what they've done in the past to be successful, and they panicked. They blew it, and they let a man who I believe is the most annoying prima donna quarterback in the history of quarterbacking hold them hostage, and now they're paying a 39-year-old $50 million a year. If I'm Lamar Jackson, you can't give me anything less than $40 million. No less than $40 million, and I would argue, because I'm your leading running back and your leading quarterback, you need to pay me for both.
This man, Aaron Rodgers, really bankrupt the city of Green Bay. I mean, how much money they gonna give this dude to do what he does? It's just ridiculous. And if you're Jordan Love, I feel like he's probably the next in line to move. It wouldn't surprise me to see someone like the Colts make a move for him, Seattle make a move for him, or one of these other teams. If you're Washington, if you played your cards right, you probably could have got Jordan Love from Green Bay. You didn't have to go and get Carson Wentz. So,
I think Jordan Love's move will most likely happen after the draft, once people see how these dominoes fall. But I think back to your point about the draft, I think it doesn't change a lot, because from what we had heard, the Commanders weren't really high on a lot of the quarterbacks that were in the draft this year. So they were probably going to look for a veteran anyway. They were in the veteran camp. The Broncos were in a veteran move type of camp. So both of those guys address dudes with veterans. Now, the interesting part comes with, what does Seattle want to do? Do they really want Drew Lock as their quarterback? Or will they be in play to maybe add one of these guys in the draft? Do they get someone early like Malik Willis and really look to kind of do a similar thing and maybe even more athleticism to the game? Or do they roll the dice on a guy later in the later rounds, an Eric Berrier, and bring him in and see what he can bring and be very much like a Russell Wilson-like quarterback to take them into whatever might be the next level?
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating because you think Geno Smith is still there. So it's not a foregone conclusion that Drew Lock is going to be the starter. He has to beat out Geno Smith. I love the Eric Berry succession plan. Gives you a little bit what you had in Russell Wilson. He's a state of Washington, local product. A lot of fans out there in Cheney, Washington, that watched him go out there and dominate on the red turf, the Walter Payton Award winner. And we also know that there's still a few little carrots dangling out there. Jameis Winston, and also you have Deshaun Watson, how that situation plays out. So a lot more that's still unknown here as we kicked off free agency this past week, or this week, with a bang. But make sure you follow Gene on Twitter at Gene Clemons. Subscribe to his work on The Athletic. Coach Gene Clemons on YouTube does a great job, and he always keeps it spicy every day, or 3 times a day, or 3 times a week. I'm sorry, I won't put that much work on you. 3 times a week, talking spicy. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll step aside and take another break and be back with more football game plans, NFL All-32. And welcome back to Football Game Plans, NFL All-32 show. Emery Hunt, the czar of the playbook, joined here now with Brandon Howard of The Athletic, who was at the Combine, along with myself and Turron, Davenport, Chris James. We're all out there. Brandon, always a pleasure to join you. Follow him on Twitter at BHoward_81. So we're talking takeaways about the Combine, Brandon. Unique this year. The last time we was all out there was February 2020, right before everything shut down. So what were some of your thoughts on how this year's edition was run? And also, who was the biggest standout to you coming from Indianapolis?
Oh man, it was run. I think a lot of people had some gripes with it, including player agents, with the way the bench press and everything, and, how everything was so condensed and what we were, how they were expecting players to perform. Like, as you saw, like one receiver bench press, that was crazy, so that was one of the things that I think got a lot of people talking but, and then, player medicals, and then being able to be there for the media, to do player interviews, and, that was held up, and, you just never knew who was going to come through. And then sometimes you got a lot of players that you wanted to speak to and couldn't. So it was just, I think there's some work to do there of it moving forward, but I think they'll get there and figure it out. Also, but as far as players that stood out, I want to say Thornton, the kid from Baylor, obviously the receiver that had one of the faster 40 times there, came in at 4.28, and he's from the crib. He's from here in South I known better. I should have known, he was going to run fast, because my pick to run the fastest was Danny Gray out of SMU. But I should have known it was going to be somebody from the crib, from here in South Florida. I was going to turn in a good time. So that was it. Yeah, I think Tyquan Thornton, if you look at his film, he's pretty dynamic as well on film.
It's interesting, man. Now that I have you here, I want to get your take on this. You're a track guy. You're an All-American track guy. You know speed. So what was your thoughts on how everyone at the combine was either running 4.2, 4.3, or 4.4? Is everybody that fast nowadays, or was, in your opinion, was there something wrong?
I think something's off. Something's off. I have to be honest about it. And years ago, it was explained how the conference. So it's automatic and laser, and then it's part human. So the stopwatch, at the end, that's human. So there's a lot of room for human error. So they need to go ahead and make this whole thing laser time. Like, there's no way the issue. We still are relying on a human to stop the clock at the appropriate time. So I still think it's an inexact science right now, and they need to kind of narrow that down and figure out how we're going to time these guys moving forward, because there's a lot of room for error there, and there's no way in the world that I saw ran 4.3, because on film it's definitely not there.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. When you see these times, you see these fast 40s, and you go back and watch the film, you're saying that there's no way possible this person runs 4.3, whatever, in a 40-yard dash. So lastly, Brandon, before we get out of here, when you think about spinning this forward, which player, in your opinion, made the most money from that last week in Indianapolis?
Man, that's tough, but I'm going to go ahead and say the defensive tackle from Georgia. Coming in at that 4.8 40. I mean, just imagine like an industrial refrigerator just running at you that fast. Like, there ain't no way, man. So, my guy Jerry Seymour, footwork guy, he had a very good comment. He's a running backs coach, and he said, "Hey, doing all these drills and we throwing balls at running backs and all that side come and get you. Do you really want to feel that?" So we got to teach these guys to start getting up the field, because it's players like that are going to change the game for us. So I think he made himself some money.
Definitely made himself some money. We're making ourselves some money here having you on the show at NFL All-32. Brandon, follow him on Twitter at bhoward_81. Subscribe to his great work at The Athletic. Brandon, we appreciate you stopping by, taking time. So that's it for this edition of Football Game Plan's NFL All-32 show. I am Emery Hunt, the czar of the playbook. Be sure to follow me on all of my social media accounts. Also, check out and subscribe on iTunes, the Football Game Plan podcast. Leave us a 5-star rating. Subscribe on YouTube, youtube.com/footballgameplan. And before we close out the show for the season, it's draft season. Be sure to pre-order your copy of our Football Game Plan draft guide located at footballgameplan.com/2022 draft guide.
It's D-U-E-U till I see you by this point. You're reading my mind. It's time for football. We about to keep this thing moving. I'm about it. You're with it. Let's do it. We gon' make this thing official. You heard me? If you're the best, then let's prove it. The goal is set to have a team become a unit. Man, we about to keep this thing moving. I'm about it. You're with it. Let's do it. We gon' make this thing official. You heard me? If you're the best, then let's prove it. The goal is set to have a team become a unit. Yeah.